was the third year of the war. The Red Army was getting ready for the Battle of Belarus. The mass use of tanks was particularly impossible there, among forests and marshes. The constraint of the tank maneuver should have been compensated by the Soviet cavalry, for which there were no impassable terrain. 3 years had passed since the beginning of the war. The Red Army was going to liberate Belarus. Together with tanks and artillery, cavalry units went forward. Alexander Penuev, Ivan Yakushin, Nikolai Dupak, and others in the Cavalry of the Liberators series. In the pre-war years, the number of Soviet cavalry units constantly decreased. By the year 1938, and by the beginning of the war, out of the 7 corps commands and 32 cavalry divisions, there were 4 corps and 13 divisions left. Thus, the number of service arm was decreased 2.5 times, and the cavalry units were transformed into the motorized ones. Alexander Penuev recollects. The squadron commander became the tank squadron commander. Row, strike. The squadron members refused. In spite of the difficulties of service, cavalrymen were the greatest patriots of their service arm. I had to part company with my horse, but I did not take off the spurs and the nice felt either. In the epoch of motors, the concept of the cavalry use changed. The new field manual provided for use of cavalry units together with tank units, motorized infantry, and aviation. At the same time, cavalrymen had to get into the breakthrough and operate at the enemy's communications. In other words, nobody among the leaders of the Red Army intended to use the cavalry for the infamous attacks with swords against tanks. During the year of the Great Patriotic War, the cavalrymen's tactics was close to that of the motorized infantry. Ivan Yakushin recollects. Horses were used as a means of transportation. The order to dismount was given. The ringleaders took the horses and left, and the cavalrymen fought as the infantry. Cavalrymen could quickly move across the roadless terrain where the regular machinery stalled. In a night, a cavalry unit could cover up to 100 kilometers. Nikolai Dupak recollects. Trot, gallop, endless orders. Do not spare horses. Do not spare horses. In the time of peace, you could have gone on trial for a blown horse. Now, horses would fall dead because of the cardiac rupture. The cavalry participated in almost all the operations of the Red Army as mobile units during the Great Patriotic War. Near Stalingrad, it was 3 cavalry corps which ensured the deployment of the 2nd Guards Army, without which the entrapping of Paulus's army could have failed. Later on, the attacking Soviet troops used the cavalry units, undemanding to provisions and the quality of roads, to capture important points and lines in the enemy's rear. Georgy Zhukov, the chief of the General Staff, formulated the tasks of the cavalry for 1941 as follows. When the enemy's rear has enveloped for several hundred kilometers in the forest and is not protected against the major subversive operations on our part, the raids of the Red cavalrymen in the enemy's rear could play a decisive role in the disorganization of its control and supply, and hence the defeat of the Nazi troops. In summer 1941, the Soviet military leaders began to create new cavalry units, with 83 light cavalry units additionally deployed by the year end. In December, the Supreme Command issued an order according to which cavalry divisions were unified into cavalry corps, reporting to the front commanders. They had a very important task. Jointly, with tank and motorized troops, they developed success in breaking down the defense, followed the retreating enemy, and fought against the reserves and rear of the enemy. 15 cavalry divisions participated in the Battle of Moscow. The 1st Guards Corps of General Pavel Belov and 2nd Guards Cavalry Corps of General Dovator was especially successful there. Lev Mikhailovich Dovator headed a separate cavalry group back in August 1941. Formed of Cossack regiments, the cavalry body of troops raided the enemy's rear for the first time, attacked the communications, destroying headquarters, transport, warehouses, and personnel of the Nazis. By their sudden advance, the Soviet cavalrymen broke down the defense of the Nazi troops at several kilometers of the front. The actions of the cavalry unit of the Red Army, which penetrated the enemy's rear by 100 kilometers, caused panic among the Nazis. Dovator's Cossacks killed over 2,500 soldiers and officers of the enemy, destroyed 9 tanks, over 200 vehicles, several military warehouses. The Nazi leaders suggested a large monetary reward for Dovator's head and created special units to capture him, but the cavalrymen were imperceptible. In November 1941, the Corps of Brigadier General Dovator delivered hard defense combat in Volokholamsk direction, protecting Moscow. On December 11, the Corps was relocated to the area of Kubinka. Having covered 150 kilometers in the rear of the Nazi troops, the Corps came to the river Ruza in 8 days. The vanguard units of the Corps were already next to the village of Palashkino, where numerous Nazi forces were concentrated. To the opposite from the village, under the steep bank of the river, Dovator placed the field headquarters of the Corps and climbed to the riverbank to examine the location of the enemy's defense in person. The Nazis opened fire. The general was deadly wounded by a machine gun burst. The Cossacks surrounded the village of Palashkino and avenged for their commander in a vicious fight, having destroyed the enemy's group. The portrait of the wartime cavalrymen significantly differed from the pictured image of the brave and daring Budunovets. Prior to the war, a cadre Soviet cavalry commander had studied for 3 years. Not only could he perfectly ride and take care of the horse, but also underwent a broad general military training. The cadets received the basic information about all the service arms with which the cavalry cooperated during the battle. As a result, a military expert able to command not only a cavalry, but also a rifle section and sometimes a company graduated from school. In spring 1944, the general headquarters faced a dilemma: whether an offensive should be carried out in Ukraine or the major thrust should be delivered in Belarus. The offensive in Ukraine seemed to be more attractive, while in the event of success, it immediately opened way for the Soviet troops to Poland and Romania. However, in such a case, the advancing Soviet troops faced the real danger of receiving a blow in the flank from the so-called Belarusian Balcony, where the defense of the Nazi Army Group Center in articulated dispositions were located. As a result, the general headquarters decided to begin the offensive in Belarus in order to liquidate the Belarusian protrusion and to defeat the Army Group Center. In the event of success, the road to the west opened to the Red Army. It was simultaneously let off the leash to carry out offensive operations in Ukraine. Prior to the Soviet offensive, the leaders of the Wehrmacht found themselves in the same situation as the Soviet general headquarters 3 years before. One of the principal reasons for catastrophes of the Red Army in 1941 was the ambiguity of the enemy's plans. The Soviet commanders were once again mistaken trying to guess the direction of the major attacks of the Nazis. However, when the opponents changed their places, the Red Army held the strategic initiative. The Nazis began to make the same mistakes. The successes of the Soviet troops in Ukraine brought the Nazi commanders to the conclusion that the major attack of the 1944 summer campaign would happen there as well. Former chief of the operations staff of the Armed Forces High Command, Yodel, informed during the proceedings in Nuremberg, "We believe that the Russians will attack at the southern section, namely in the direction of the Romanian oil. That is why our major tank divisions were concentrated in the area of the southern groups of armies." Under the war conditions, the period of training in cavalry, as well as in many other training schools, were reduced to 6 months. Studying the short program within the limited period of time required immense exertion from the cadets. It was not enough for the future cavalry commanders to learn riding. They had to know how to handle horses correctly, and this was very complicated, especially for those who had had no similar experience prior to the training school. Alexei Prokhorov recollects. We would be so tired that we would fall completely exhausted. We would close our eyes and see horses. From the very first days, cadets learned how to approach a horse, how to saddle it, how to inspect the saddling. While saddling, it was necessary to control that no foreign objects got under the saddle cloth. Otherwise, the horse's back could be hurt during riding. Another nuance. When putting the saddle onto the horse's back, it was required not to put it into its place immediately, but to put on the neck first and then move so as to straighten the tucked hair on the back. Otherwise, the horse's back could be hurt during riding. Alexander Penyuev recollects. Of course, all of this is quite simple, but there are lots of such nuances, and the cavalryman has to know them by heart, as his combat effectiveness is directly dependent on the condition of his horse. The cadets took care of horses thrice a day. As a rule, a combat horse was assigned to each of them. But if feeding horses was easy, their cleaning required significant physical efforts. Alexander Penyuev recollects. I cleaned my horse for an hour and a quarter in the morning, an hour and a half in the afternoon, and for 40 minutes before dinner. It did not matter whether it was cold, rained, or snow. You had to take the horse to the horse standing to the street, then to wash hooves, to retrieve oats, let drink, to inspect the frame. If the horse had urinated at night, then to sand, to clean irons with a string. There were no Saturdays, no Sundays. If you left on Sunday, you had to return by the afternoon cleaning. Learning to ride began with strengthening the seat. Cadets learned to ride without a saddle. A horseman let his horse run in training trot, controlling it with twisters only. The second important element of riding was trick riding, the gymnastic routine of jumps performed by the horseman when his horse moved in circles. The training was crowned by learning the basics of stunts on horseback. Cadets had to throw off the irons, balancing on a galloping horse, then to jump off, hit the ground with their feet, and return to the saddle again, or to keep on horseback while pretending to be wounded. Alexander Penyuev recollects. It is done like this. The right leg got onto the saddle and you pretended to be killed laying along the crupper. The horse moves on its own. The enemy does not shoot. Having approached, you jump to the saddle, take out the sword, and the fighting starts. Learning to use the sword began with preparatory exercises, which helped to develop the mobility of wrist, elbow, and shoulder joints of both hands. One of the most important exercises was the circular rotation of the sword with your hand bent in elbow as well as straight. The exercise makes the wrist strong, flexible, and sharp. The second exercise is moving your hand down to the right and to the left, so that the blade makes the full circle. Upon exercising on the ground, the cadets began to master them on horseback. The so-called osier chopping was part of the training. A regular width, 1.52 centimeter in diameter, around 1.5 meter long, was called an osier. It was placed on a special 1 meter wooden stand. The osier was considered chopped if upon the blow it fell vertically down. If a part of the osier kept hanging by the cortex or flew aside, the blow was not scored. While delivering a powerful chopping blow, the horseman should be set up to the maximum. Any failure could cost the horse some part of its ear, a cut crupper, and even a wound of the hock. The cadets who mastered such exercises better than others received the perfect chopping mark, established at the beginning of the 1920s. While training, cadets, as before, mastered attacks while mounted, but hardly did anyone use that skill at the front. Upon graduating, newly qualified second lieutenants were sent to the reserve regiment, and from there to the front in trains with horses. The two-axis heated freight cars, as a rule, had a cargo capacity, 40 persons, 8 horses. It was required to feed and let the horses drink at the stations, but the most difficult thing was not to get bombed. In this case, they were not permitted to let their horses out of the cars. The horses died in bombings more often than their riders. Nikolai Derevyankin recollects. At Staraya Russa, we were bombed. People ran out. And what about horses? Oh, they neighed. They just cried, asked to let them out of the car. So we lost 25 horses dead there, or maybe they ran away somewhere. The principal weapon of the cavalryman was a combat horse, a rifle, and a sword. The cavalry sword was intended for mounted battles only. With the sword blade, it was possible to chop as well as stab with the same result. For the sword blow to become deadly, it had to be powerful, quick, precise, and cutting. The principal fire weapon of a cavalry regiment was machine guns. The old but reliable and powerful Maxim machine gun, called by the gunmen as if it were their comrade. Maxim was in operational service. A horse and machine gun squadron with 16 machine guns on machine gun carriers was included into the regiment. In 1930, the machine gun was seriously modernized. The Maxims were widely used in the Red Army. There was also an air defense variant of the machine gun, from which it was possible to hit low-flying aircraft. It is with the Maxim machine guns of the 1910-1930 model that the Red Army entered the Great Patriotic War. Gunmakers upgraded the Maxim, equipped it with a simplified aiming sight, and replaced the water-filling opening with a wide neck in the jacket of the barrel water cooling. It permitted the soldier to cool the gun quickly in winter, filling the jacket with ice and snow. As a result, during the whole war, the Maxim remained the most efficient mounted machine gun, although it had drawbacks due to the old design. However, the majority of the veteran gunners note the reliability of the Maxim machine gun in the first place. Ivan Platinkov recollects, "There were hot battles with the Nazis' attempts to counterattack, to attack. I had to work with the Maxim for 2 days practically non-stop. The liquid boiled, evaporated. The barrel was hot, but the gun continued to fire." The machine gun's weight, as a rule, was not so critical for the cavalrymen, but made the life of infantry gunners even more complicated. The Maxim mounting weight, over 30 kilograms, the gun's body 16 kilograms, the plate 8 kilograms, the box with the ammunition belt for 250 cartridges, enough for 30 seconds of uninterrupted fire, 10 kilograms, and the infantry had to carry all of that with them. Besides the machine gun itself, the gunners usually had to carry flasks with water to cool it. However, the outdated water cooling provided the constant danger of the machine gun cooling. It was complicated to move the Maxim machine gun during the fight. That is why the gunners moved behind the infantry during the attack. Vasily Gordov recollects. The infantry went in the forefront. We followed, supported them with fire. When they would move forward, you would pull the gun on the mounting with wheels as a cart. Another serious drawback of the Maxim was fabric ammunition belts. When snow fell on it, the belt got wet, a cartridge could get lopsided, and the machine gun stopped firing. And imagine, if the soldier was meeting an attack at the moment, one had to fire non-stop in the situation. Nevertheless, in such cases, an experienced gunner could always open the lock and fix the problem, although it was risky under the hostile fire. Besides, if anything became jammed in the Maxim, it could be fixed immediately in the battlefield. But what is important, in spite of all Maxim's flaws, veterans always speak about its efficiency with pride. Fedor Bakurin recollects. The Nazis attempted to force machine guns out of action in the first place, because it was most dangerous. A shell fell, one hand to charge another one, and it could cover several meters with the machine gun meanwhile. It moved off. The sight was 250 meters, and firing rate was 500 to 600 shots per second. A bullet came in every 30 centimeters. An experienced gunner was always respected in a battalion. The sergeant major could provide an extra 100 grams of vodka. The cook did not forget, because it was gunners with the Maxims who were the main firepower of the rifle company and the cavalry squadron. Due to the Soviet army assuming the vast offensive in 1943, the cavalry troops were reorganized. Marshal of the Soviet Union Budeny was appointed commander-in-chief of the cavalry. Divisions were strengthened and firepower was increased. The anti-tank means of the cavalry corps were strengthened. The Red Army included 8 cavalry corps, including 7 Guards Corps in the field forces and 3 separate cavalry divisions in Transbaikal and the Far East. 1 cavalry corps was in Iran. In 1943, the cavalry played an important part in the Battle of the Caucasus. In the Battle of Kursk and the liberation of the left bank Ukraine, the 7th Guards Cavalry Corps participated in the Battle of the Dnieper in September. Under hostile fire, the Soviet cavalry crossed the Dnieper near Chernihiv. They managed to capture a beachhead on the opposite bank and keep it. Further, to develop the success of the breakthrough battle, the Cavalry Corps began to unite into motorized cavalry groups. Such groups included 1 to 2 Cavalry Corps and 1 tank or motorized corps. Thousands of tanks, self-propelled guns, and aircraft got ready to deliver a crushing blow to the enemy. In spite of so many troops involved in the operation, the Soviet military leaders managed to hide the true direction of their major strike. To deceive the enemy, the front groups in Belarus were ordered to build at least 3 defense lines to the depth of up to 40 kilometers. Settlements were adjusted for perimeter defense, and even the army papers published articles on defense only, which created the relevant illusions with the enemy. The regrouping of troops was occupied by thorough camouflage. In the immediate battle area, units and bodies of troops moved in small groups at night only. It was not permitted to make fire neither in the daytime or at night. The 5th Guards and the 2nd Tank Army, as well as a part of the bodies of troops of the long-range aviation which had to participate in the operation, were in the southern wing of the Soviet-German front. To make the Red Army appear to deliver the major strike in the south, for the military leaders of the Wehrmacht, a false body of troops of 9 rifle divisions strengthened with tanks and artillery, was created in the right wing of the 3rd Ukrainian Front, to the north of Chisinau. That area was filled with dummy tanks and anti-aircraft artillery. To be more persuasive, fighters patrolled the territory where aggregations of troops and military equipment were simulated. The Soviet preparations in Belarus could not go unnoticed, but owing to the camouflage, the Nazi did not pay any particular attention to them. It was indicated in a German newsletter of June 13, 1944, evaluating the enemy's situation in the Eastern Front. The offensive of the Soviet troops being prepared against the Army Group Center is designed to mislead the Nazi military leaders concerning the direction of the principal strike and to remove the reserves from the area between Carpathians and Kaval. The mistake of the Nazi military leaders can also be attributed to the fact that it expected one mighty offensive and the appropriate body of troops. However, the actual plan of the Operation Bagration was based on a number of crushing strikes. At the initial stage, operations were planned to envelop Vitebsk and Vabruisk, to crush the 3rd Tank and 9th Armies of the Nazis. After that, the offensive in the direction of Minsk to envelop the 4th Nazi Army. Thus, in 2 stages, all the 3 armies forming part of the Army Group Corps were crushed. The operation plan was devised with due consideration of the nature of the hostilities area, with its dense forests and marshes. Common infantry soldiers had to put on their feet special accessories wickered of osier called makrostups to get through the marshes. To have tanks pass the marshes, special log roads were made on the marshy ground. Such conditions turned out to be perfect for the use of cavalry. The Soviet cavalry had to prove once again that they were still irreplaceable and could efficiently operate in the conditions of the current war. The 1st Baltic and 3rd Belarusian fronts began the offensive in the direction of Vitebsk. On the morning of June 22nd, exactly 3 years upon the beginning of the war, they began a developing attack with the efforts of the vanguard battalions, which tried the enemy's defense. The vanguard units of the front, supported by tanks and artillery, moved to the distance of up to 1.5 kilometers and captured the 1st position of the enemy's defense. Thus, the developing attacks turned into a general offensive. The following day, the major forces of the shock troops of the 2 fronts were engaged. It is now that the active actions of the Soviet cavalry began in close cooperation with tanks. By the evening of June 23, 1944, a breach developed in the setup of the Nazi troops, which was entered by a motorized cavalry group. It started deep into the Nazi troops passing by the Vitebsk fortress. In the battles with the retreating, dispirited enemy, the training school skills of cavalry attacks were quite useful. Alexander Klimov recollects, "For the first time in my life, I got into a cavalry attack. I did not kill my first Nazi. He was running as if he were mad. I hesitated for a second and hit him on his helmet. He fell. My blade wrenched. My elbow was sore for 2 weeks after that. Had the blade gone to the left, I would have cut off my horse's leg. I caught up with the next one, held back my horse, and cut off the Nazi's head with a bend. The blood rushed. I hit the 3rd one on the shoulder." By June 25th, 5 Nazi divisions were enveloped near Vitebsk. General Gollwitzer, the commander of the enveloped garrison, attempted to organize a breakthrough from the trap. According to the Soviets' data, the number of Nazi soldiers lost in action amounted to 10,000 persons. Over 20,000 persons fell prisoners. But that was just the beginning. In the lines of the 3rd Nazi Tank Army, a 150-kilometer breach was gapping. The offensive of the 1st Belarusian Front in the direction of Babruisk began one day after Vitebsk. By June 26th, Babruisk was enveloped from 2 sides, and between the shock troops, a narrow corridor of just some 25 kilometers was left. And the following day, the units of the 9th and 1st Guards Tank Corps joined to the north of the town. Around 40,000 persons of the 9th Nazi Army were enveloped. By June 29th, Babruisk was captured. Bush, the commander of the Army Group Center, was dismissed. Walter Model was appointed to his position. Together with Model, tank divisions from the Army Corps, North Ukraine, and North began to arrive in Belarus. However, neither Model nor the awaited tank divisions could prevent the catastrophe. The bodies of troops of the three Soviet fronts steadily closed up in Minsk. Starting from the first days of its offensive, the Cavalry Corps moved by 40 to 50 kilometers per day. The regiments moved in a special order, which enabled them to efficiently attack the enemy and to counter their attacks. First, paired patrols, main and side ones, came. Then, the advanced party moved at the distance of sound and visual signaling. This included a fortified sword platoon, a machine gun carrier, and a weapon. On the move, the cavalrymen marched in three. As soon as the Nazis opened fire, the soldiers on the sides threw their reins to the horsemen in the middle, jumped off their horses, making a skirmish line, and he took the horses away from fire. Ivan Yakushin, the commander of an anti-tank cavalry platoon, recollects, "We had it different from the infantry. The .45 caliber anti-tank gun was pulled by 4 horses instead of 2. A 57 millimeter gun was pulled by 6 horses. The horses were strong and tallow. During our actions in the Nazi rear, each squadron was given a weapon. I, as the platoon commander, had to be next to the weapon where the most dangerous situation in the battle could happen. That is why I was by the weapon as a rule, which was attached to the advance party." The regiment vanguard followed the advance party at a certain distance. It happened that the Nazis let the main patrols of the cavalry and met the advance party with fire. If the block was small, the soldiers of the advance party crushed it with their own forces. But if the block was strong, the vanguard approached, dismounted, and fought on foot. If the vanguard did not manage, and the enemy was heavily fortified, the whole regiment entered the battle. The artillery following the cavalry turned to fire with open sights. Each regiment weapon was pulled by 6 horses. In the field, gallop in a column, observing the distance of 30 meters. The battery came to the fire position. Drivers followed the commander's orders, turned horses. The 6 made a semicircle with the radius of the same 30 meters. The straighteners aimed the weapon at the enemy, and the loader took the shell required. 1 minute had passed from the batteries going to the fire position to fire. Carts turned all around. They were usually used as a transportation means. And when the battle began, the machine gun was taken off the carts and the horses, and it was taken to the rear. However, in the event of cavalry attacks, they actually turned around, the same as during the Civil War. Cavalrymen opened fire from machine guns. During the offensive, the cavalrymen were prohibited from making fire at the encampments. Smoke from them revealed the regiment location. Movement stopped often. Carts stalled in the marsh. Then cavalrymen made a wood road. They cut thin trees and put the flooring with perches across. If required, thicker logs were put along the way, fastened with young fir trees. Only at night, stopping to rest, the cavalrymen made fire and rested masking fire with the materials available. With the dawn, the order, "Fall into line," was heard. The soldiers took their places, hungry, and movement continued in the direction indicated by the guides. The rest break and porridge prepared in the mobile kitchen trailers followed sometime later. As a rule, the cavalrymen had quite good food. But if the kitchen trailers were late during the offensive, the soldiers replenished their supplies at the expense of the food captured from the enemy. We lacked edible salt. Potash salt, which was used as a fertilizer in the fields, was procured instead in villages. Sometimes, in the absence of pots, the cases of the German gas masks were used to prepare food. Sometimes one even had to eat horseflesh. Only injured horses were used for food if their treatment was impossible in the conditions of war. At the same time, cavalrymen felt distressed if they could not help their horses. Nikolai Dupac recollects. It happened that our commissar died. He went to the roadside and tripped a mine, and his horse had its leg hurt. It stood, looked, and cried. We understood that it was helpless. It leaped on 3 legs. That was the most horrible episode of my life. But if the battlefield conditions permitted, the cavalrymen tried to cure even the critically wounded horses. It is not surprising that cavalrymen would sometimes care more about their horse's food than about their own. A war horse had to eat 4 kilos of oats a day, a cart horse 6 kilos, an artillery horse 8 kilos. As a rule, there were no delays with oat supplies to the units. Alexander Klimov recollects. Fodder was supplied regularly. Besides, each platoon had a cart with oats. That was the emergency ration. Each cavalryman had 2 bags with oats at the saddle, the emergency ration as well. It could be used only following the order. But it happened, especially in the offensive, that we had to use the pasture forage. Ivan Yakushin recollects. We came to the Vitsebsk region and there was nothing there, neither hay nor straw. Horses began to eat horse lines. This could cause gripes and whatnot. We had to take off straw roofs from old abandoned houses. 5 days upon the breakthrough, a motorized cavalry group advanced by approximately 200 kilometers without permitting the retreating Nazi troops to restore the front. At the same time, it led the infantry, all the time being in front of it at the distance of 25 to 30 kilometers. The infantry reached the group at the Byarzina River. The 4th Nazi Field Army began to retreat to the Byarzina, trying to get away from envelopment. The retreating Nazi troops were constantly attacked by I-1 and 2 strike fighters. This retreat became a death road for the Nazis. They did not manage to entrench at the Byarzina. On June 30th, by 8 a.m., the 3rd Guards Cavalry Corps had crossed the river under the cover of artillery fire and occupied a beachhead on its western bank. A bit later, a pontoon bridge was built in the area of Lyashchina. This enabled the Cavalry Corps to cross the Byarzina, in spite of the hostile fire. The beachhead created by the Soviet troops at the river deprived the Nazi troops of the only opportunity to restore the front. Upon the 4-day Battle of the Byarzina, a motorized cavalry group came to Minsk-Vilnius Railway and cut it, depriving the Nazis of the possibility to retreat to Vilnius and Lida. On July 3rd, the Soviet troops captured Minsk, having simultaneously enveloped a large group of Nazi troops. Having crushed 3 Nazi armies one after another, the Soviet troops continued their movement to the west. In a couple of days, the troops of the 1st Belarusian Front came to the Vistula and captured areas of the north and south of Warsaw, in the area of Puławy and Magnitsu. The troops of the four fronts covered 600 kilometers directly in 6 days, having crushed the main forces of the Army Corps Center. Alexander Penouev. In his recommendation to awarding the Order of Alexander Nevsky, the commander of the Rifle Regiment which supported my division with fire noted, Captain Penouev used the old Russian method of rolling the battery, ensuring constant support of the infantry. What did I do? One battery fired and the second one marched. As soon as it occupied the fire position, I ordered the battery, which has fired already, to move forward. The fire is not that strong, but it is ready any time. The Order of Alexander Nevsky was established in the summer of 1942. The commanders of the Red Army, who had not only been brave in battles, but also managed to ensure a significant defeat to the enemy with minimal losses to their own troops. The Order of Alexander Nevsky is the lowest of the commander orders. Commanders of companies, squadrons, battalions, regiments were granted the order. While no life portraits of Alexander Nevsky were left, architect Telyatnikov, who created the sketch of the order, placed a shield with the profile of actor Nikolai Cherkasov, who played the commander's role in a similarly named movie, in the center of the star. The Order of Alexander Nevsky was granted to 42,165 commanders, units, and bodies of troops during the war. It was also awarded to foreign citizens. The defeat of the Army Corps Center in Belarus enabled the First Ukrainian Front to take the offensive and came to the Vistula, having created a large Sandomir base area. It is the Vistula base areas that would have become the starting point of the jump to the heart of Germany, to the Oder. The cavalry once again demonstrated that they were irreplaceable in action. If tank troops were the sword of the Red Army, the cavalry was a sharp and long sword, a fine tool to complete especially important tasks in the offensive operations of the Great Patriotic War.